That light is bad in your eyes. So hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alex Mackey, and I'm going to be talking to you about virtual reality. All the slides and stuff I'm going to go through, they'll all be on my website if you want to look at it later. What are we going to talk about? Well, there was a presentation last month about getting involved with some of the web aspects of VR. So I'm going to concentrate more on some of the history of this and some examples of real-world usage. And then I'm going to hand over to Lars, who's going to talk a bit more about AR and MR and the HoloLens in particular. I'd like to start with a quote by a guy called Alex St. John. So Alex St. John is a bit of a controversial character here, and if you're not familiar with this guy, I encourage you to Google him and try not to get angry at some of his ideas on how to run a gaming company. Whatever we think of Alex's opinions, he certainly was instrumental in some of the development of the games industry, and he was one of the driving forces behind something called DirectX, which a lot of people will be familiar with on the Windows platform. And he says that VR as we know it today is a bad idea, and it will continue to fail because of a persistent failure to understand how our minds generate our experience of reality and a failure to appreciate how lazy and law supreme we are. Now, I think Alex is wrong on this, and hopefully over the next 20 minutes or so, I can convince you of this as well. So I'd like to begin by talking about brains. So I'm going to put it to you that something does not have to be real in order to have an influence and a lasting impact on us. Now, there's a lot of different examples of this that we're all very familiar with. We've all had the experience of reading a good book, maybe listening to a bit of music, and it stays with you. This can really affect you. This can last some of the effects of these things. This is from a conference called Lars Conference in Melbourne. So it's ramping up at the moment. I'd encourage you guys to look at it. It's sort of lean, agile type stuff. And it's a setup by a group called the RIA Group. And there's two platforms here, and there's a plank of wood in between. And you put on a headset, and it makes it look like you're walking between a really high building. And this is what really sort of got me interested in virtual reality, as I tried this and found my legs shaking as I started making my way across the platform here. I'm very aware that just in the hall there of Swinburne University and in no danger whatsoever, but it certainly got me thinking about the effect of it. So shortly after, I went and bought a HTC Vive, and I'm just going to get Lars to kick off that video. And this video here, this is a game called Ritchie's Plank Experience here. And the idea of this game is that you go up in this high lift and you go and perform various sort of unpleasant feats here. So you can see that you go and walk out on a plank here, and you make your way out onto so you're looking out over the city here, and even though the graphics, you know, they're good, they're okay, they're not amazing, but it's still enough to actually give you that genuine fear of heights as you're walking out on the plank here. And because of this is one of my favourite sort of games to go and show people that have never worked with VR before. And so when I got the device, I got my wife to go and have a go on this. And one of the really mean things you can do when someone is playing this game is just go over and give them a little push. So all of this got me thinking, if we can control this reality, what could we do with this? Let's start off with a bit of history. So I'm going to argue that as human beings, we've been trying to create and control reality for a lot longer than you may think. So if we go back towards the 1800s or so, there was a bit of a fashion amongst artists to create these panoramic paintings. And these are enormous paintings, with the idea being that they'll sort of dwarf you in scale. And as you're looking at this, you'll feel very much as if you're in the scene. So this is part of one of the paintings here, which is 14 meters high and over 40 meters in diameter. It's enormous, and there's various other paintings like this that are sort of battle scenes, and because they're so large, you can get some impression maybe of what the artist is trying to convey. I'm going to move forward now to 1838, and a guy called Wheatstone found that the brain processes two images into a single 3D object, and from this discovery, he went on to develop something you're probably familiar with called the Viewmaster Stereoscope. And I don't know if you remember from your childhood, these sort of round things here, and you've got a plastic viewer. You'd put these things in, and it would give the appearance of depth on the scene here. And this discovery is still made use of to some extent in some of the VR headsets today. My favourite device, though, is this one. This is the Sensorama, and this was developed in 1962 by a guy named Morten Heilig. It was way ahead of its time. So this device here came fitted with speakers, a stereoscope 3D display, a vibrating chair, fans, and a smell generator. We can only imagine what that might have created. It also came with 6 films, including I'm a Coca-Cola Bottle, which I'd really love to show you what it is. I'm really curious about this, but we won't know. There's, I think there's 6 of these things around, probably held by various tech millionaires or so. Jump forwards, and we're probably more familiar with this. We see the first head-mounted display in the 60s. There was an early flight simulator a bit earlier than that. We see the development of Oculus Rift, Face, and Vive, and so on, which are really pretty decent consumer devices. Let's talk about some real-world usages of VR. So I'm going to start off with one in Melbourne. Who's been to this place? If you've never tried virtual reality, this is a great place to go and do this. For about $80 or so, this is an enormous warehouse in North Melbourne. You put on this backpack here, which contains a small computer and various sensors, a headset, and go into a large warehouse, and it makes it look like you're in the middle of the zombie apocalypse, and you can blow the crap out of a load of zombies and walk around this warehouse. The scene will update and so on. A very similar setup. I'm just going to get Lars to play that video again. And is used by the US military in order to go and simulate various different training scenes and operations. So again, a very large warehouse, a similar setup, and instead of some very sort of large, having to have some very large scenes, they can computer control this, create various different scenes that they want to go and demonstrate and train their soldiers and police forces for. And so the guys are probably seeing something like this as they're playing this. So it's pretty cool being able to do this, and it's obviously very useful for military and law enforcement. It's been employed in surgery. One of the probably most famous studies concerns a gallbladder removal operation. A group of 16 surgeons and nearly 30% faster, the guys that had already been through this in the VR version. It's been employed to help teach children how to cross the road. It's a bit of a dangerous thing, obviously, learning to cross the road, and parents probably aren't that happy to let you experiment with their children, demonstrating different ways. So this proved to be quite a promising tool in order to teach young children road safety. And by being able to control some of this as well, there were some interesting insights gained from this, that when compared to adults, children will use the distance of cars rather than the actual speed the vehicle's travelling in order to judge whether it's safe or not. And we can, by being able to control these factors, we can look at different ways to go and teach kids this, and hopefully less accidents in the future. This is another video here. This is produced by the BBC, this one. And what the BBC did is they went and spoke to a load of Syrian refugees, and they interviewed them about some of the horrendous experiences these guys went through in order to reach another country. And they went and put this into this journey, which I think it's free to go and download this, and you can go and experience, some of the appalling things these people went through. And I think this is a really interesting idea, and we're starting to see a lot of artists using VR as a medium, and a lot of people using a similar sort of setup in order to convey particular messages. There was another project. I actually spoke to the organisers about whether to include it or not, and in the end we decided not to. And it's by another artist, and he was quite concerned that people were becoming very numb to some of the sort of appalling figures of various civilian deaths in places. And he's produced this fairly confronting, I would say, VR application to sort of demonstrate some of this. It's been employed in law. There was a very accurate recreation of the Auschwitz camp, and this was created in order to look at what role potentially people could have seen, people could have played in some of this, and actually used for prosecuting war criminals. This is quite a famous game now, and it's called Snow World. And the idea of it is you basically lob a load of snowballs. It's got an icy sort of cold theme. You walk around a very cold place. And this was employed for burns victims. And they reported that pain was reduced somewhere between 50 and 90% while playing this game and undergoing some treatments. And some of the people actually became so engrossed in this that they didn't even realize the treatment had finished. And this is quite a painful treatment these people are going through. And I think for me, this is maybe one of the really exciting usages of this, because unfortunately, some of us are going to have to go through some fairly unpleasant experiences, whether it's treatment for burns or a child maybe undergoing some chemotherapy or something. And if we can replace that type of experience with something better, then that's pretty cool, and we should do that. I'm going to give a warning. Who's afraid of spiders? You live in Australia. What's wrong with you? They're dangerous. Within psychotherapy, you're probably fairly familiar with the idea of desensitization. What the idea is basically that by gradually exposing someone to a phobia or fear in a controlled environment, gradually increase the intensity, hopefully you can deal with the phobia. So this video here is a sort of VR version of this, and if I just get you to skip forward a little bit further in this. So we have a sort of fairly tame version where there's a spider just in a jar there. It's fairly controlled, and if I just ramp it a bit up there, we can see that you're at a desk then, and I'm not sure I'd particularly like that, and I'm not too worried about spiders. But it's an interesting idea, being able to control that, and probably a lot easier to cope with than maybe the real thing. How can you get involved? Well, I think the presenter in the previous Buzz conference touched on this, but I completely agree that probably the easiest way to get involved with VR development is via web technologies. The great thing about web technologies is that probably a lot of us in the room already know how to use JavaScript, HTML, and write these type of things. And there's some really interesting things now. So we have the WebVR API. It's sort of maybe a little bit unstable, but basically what this does is allow you to query the capability of the devices, and it will also give you positioning information. And you can then go and take this positioning information and use it to update your game or rendering screen. Now, the reality is, unless you're very good with your 3D programming and WebGL, the majority of us probably won't be doing this because it's really hard to take these matrices and actually do something useful with them. But we'll probably make use of this for some kind of framework. My framework of choice currently is A-Frame. It's developed by Mozilla guys. It's declarative. It's very, very easy to use. And there's also some really awesome examples. So I've just finished putting together a course for an online training provider called Pluralsight. And this is about how to develop these things with web technologies. So this is one of the examples from the course. I wanted a data visualization example. As it's web technologies, I can incorporate other web technology libraries. So this is a D3 generated chart. I've imported a model here. I have a procedurally generated mountainscape, and just going and moving the model around and the craft. And this is all web technologies, JavaScript, HTML. I think you'd be fairly surprised by how little code is actually behind these scenes. So you can certainly create some quite cool things very easily. If you want to look at the example on your phone, this is the other really awesome thing about A-Frame is it will work on everything from a phone or tablet device right up to a full headset without any additional programming. So if you have an iPhone or an Android device, if you go to simpleasbest.co.uk/A-Frame, I put that data visualization example up. You can move your phone around, you can look around the scene. It's pretty cool. I think VR has something of a dark side as well, or some potential issues maybe looming on the horizon. There's already been a couple of cases around sexual harassment. We've seen a few blog posts launched. The one that comes to mind is there was a lady playing it was some kind of sort of fantasy RPG type game. Another player discovered there was another female player and made very inappropriate gestures, came very close to the player, and it can really be quite intrusive when you're actually in VR. It feels almost as if someone is touching you. I think this raises some interesting issues on how to deal with this type of thing, and what that's going to be in the future. Could VR potentially desensitize you to certain things? Whilst the idea of a VR-based game like GTA sounds really awesome, is this something we necessarily want people to be imagining more fully? I don't know. It would be quite cool, though. Potentially, people could become, there's concern that people could become more addicted than maybe something less intrusive like a console application. I think there's also an argument that if you wanted to participate in certain games, maybe the police might want to talk to you. And there's already some fairly strange things on the internet, and I don't think it's too far to imagine that if someone's participating in maybe a game or something where you go and torture people, that's a little bit strange, and maybe people should have a chat. I don't know. Whilst I was researching this, I did uncover some strange things. There's a South American company which, using various scans, will allow you to meet your unborn baby in VR. There was a guy called Westerman in 2016, and he wanted to set the record for being in VR the most amount of time, which currently stands at 25 hours. And during that time, he did nothing apart from eat pizza and pee in a bucket, so he didn't have to go and leave this experience. And this had the somewhat predictable result that he was quite unwell afterwards. But he did receive the record, so maybe it was worth it. Well done, Westerman. So I'd like to leave you with the VR thing with something really strange that I found. Now, have you ever wanted to pretend to go and kiss an alien tentacle monster? Well, you can, because this game here allows you to do so. So the object of this game is to go and kiss this alien, and you score points by kissing this, and yeah, it's a bit strange. I'm going to, on that note, thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Lars.
Thank you. I'll go really quick through this until I can actually show you the HoloLens. How about that? So that's pretty, whatever. Next, I just want to talk briefly because has anyone here ever heard of mixed reality? There's like 3 people here. No, mixed reality. Okay, cool. So we have augmented reality, which is sort of the one side of it. Simple, lightweight. It often involves a mobile device. You'll have your phone. Very often, phone, tablet will be a trigger for an augmented reality experience. You usually point it at something like a QR code or a visual image or a T-shirt or whatever it might be, right? But it's pretty static and it's quite limited, but it works really well. I've seen cool examples of a brochure for a yacht. You point this app at it through your phone, and the yacht kind of comes out of the brochure and bops on the top and all that. It's, you know, there's some really cool stuff you can do with it. There's no obstruction reality. That's important. On the other side, we've got virtual reality, which is what Alex was talking about, is a complete replacement of your reality, right? So there's nothing left of the real world. It's very good for prototyping. So you're really quick, as Alex said, very little effort is actually involved in doing a lot of the virtual reality elements because it's all built by you. You can kind of control exactly what people see. It's usually tethered. So if you've ever tried an HTC Vive or Oculus Rift or whatever, there's a big cable coming out your head, like the Matrix, then goes to a big computer, right? So that's kind of the limitation of it. And then in the middle we have mixed reality. And mixed reality, the best way I can explain it is that it's an interaction between your digital reality and your physical reality. So not in the same way as augmented, because augmented has like a trigger point. It's a way that you can have whatever your current environment is, as we will see in a minute, will interact with your digital environment. So usually I explain it by, say you have a physical desk or a table, you put a holographic ball or digital ball on that desk or that table. If you tip the table, the ball falls off, right? That's the interaction we're talking about. And it could be a chair, it could be whatever table. It doesn't have to be a predefined object, it just is there. That's the cool thing about mixed reality and the potential, really. And there's no tethering. That is, to me, probably that's not a definition of mixed reality, but for the HoloLens, which is currently almost the only mixed reality device, it is one of the defining factors to me. Natural interactions, as you'll see. All right, so there's a big, I usually have this discussion because my mantra is to try and, show people what HoloLens is, and people have great ideas and get really enthusiastic about their new next, black swan $1 million idea until I point out, well, that's actually a VR idea, right? And then they don't like me anymore. But to me, it's really important that if you are developing stuff for, I've got it here, for this device, right? It's $4,500, which is stupid, which is why I didn't buy it on my own. Why would you build something for this that you can do with a $10 Google Cardboard, right? Like, seriously, you've got to be aware of what it is you're building. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with mixed reality, is make sure it is a mixed reality experience. All right, that is the earliest prototype I can find of a HoloLens. I can't confirm, that is a HoloLens prototype, considering it's the same guy, and the guy actually, I don't know if you can see it, but if you play Xbox, that's an Xbox Kinect on his head. Sorry? He's wearing the same shirt. Well, that could be Photoshop, right? But it looks genuine, and as far as I can tell, it is genuine. I don't know how many years are between him, probably about 5, but that's where we've come so far. Pretty impressive, really. I don't know if there's any hardware people here. I'll just quickly go through the specs because it's kind of cool / kind of underwhelming. It's a bit odd. As cool as it is, this device has, I'll show you here. So there's 4 environmental cameras on the front, 2 on either side. There. There's a depth camera, so it knows how far away you are from things. There's a video camera, so you can actually record what you're seeing as a video, which usually turns out terrible because you move your head a lot. And there's 4 microphones on the front as well, which works incredibly well. Like, it's the best voice recognition system I've seen anywhere. It's very, very impressive. I don't have enough hands. The next thing that you may notice, if you come up and have a closer look at later, is that there's these 3 optical waveguides, which are the lenses that there's a little camera at the back that projects on those lenses. So there's 3 of those. And it gives you the red, green, and blue, kind of like a TV almost. It's really quite cool. It projects it in front of your eyes, so there's nothing going on your eyes. But it does give you quite a limited field of view, which I'll get to in a minute. And then finally, there's all the gadgetry. I'm not a hardware guy, so I'm not sure. Intel Cherry Trail system on chip is apparently not very impressive. It's a 32-bit processor because this thing only has 4 gigs of memory. There's an HPU, which is one of these things here, which is a holographic processing unit, which makes it sound very Star Trek-y. And it does something like 1 trillion calculations a second just for the holograms, which is impressive, I think. It's a big number. 64 gigs of storage, which is for your apps and whatnot, and runs Windows 10. So far, I have not had a blue screen of death. But yeah, it runs Windows 10, which means that's important because if you live in that universe of Windows, which I do, hence the t-shirt, is that everything that you write for Windows 10 can run on everything that runs Windows 10. Right? So if you write a mobile experience application, it'll run on this if you want to target it at HoloLens. And you use the same Visual Studio tooling. There's nothing special about it except for the Unity component, which is 3D. So that running Windows 10 is a big deal, and that's kind of why Microsoft built it as well. Spatial audio. These red things on the side is the audio. It uses something called head-related transfer function, which is a binaural system that lets you simulate exactly how your ears perceive sound, if that makes sense. So I know that the guy down the back, when he yells at me, heckling, is that he's down the back because my ears pick up the sound later. And if I turn the side, I know he's in that direction because that's the sound hits that ear before the other. Right? That's a head-related transfer function. And it's very, very complex, and luckily we don't have to deal with it at all because Microsoft's done all the hard work for us. But it works really well. It's very lifelike, and it gives you another dimension of what the experience is like. It's untethered, as I said before. This is the number one thing. It is a computer on its own. Doesn't need to be plugged into anything, maybe a battery pack, but it just works on its own. All right. This is usually what you see if you see sort of Microsoft-y, oh, look how pretty everything is. It's cool. And, oh, she's probably in Australia because there's a shark. But anyway, there's stuff on the wall and there's, on the floor and everything, right? It looks very immersive and it's very real. It's very, very pretty. When in fact, what you actually see is more like this. The field of view is probably the fact that people kind of go, oh. Which is also why you'll see when I use it in a minute, I kind of go like this. Because I can't see very much. You can see enough and you get used to it really quick, but it's nowhere near that immersive picture that we saw before. All right, there's 5 things you need to know about developing for HoloLens if that's your fancy, or even just using it. There's the gaze, that's your head. Your head is your mouse cursor, it's where you look, essentially, but it's your head that determines where you look, not your eyes. That's called gaze, and it's how you select things. So I'm gazing at things by looking at them, by moving my head, which is like pointing with a mouse. Gestures, you need to use gestures to interact with objects. So there's 2 main gestures. I'm getting sweaty. There's this, which is called the ready position, and then there's a pressed, and that's all you do, right? That you can then hold and you can manipulate stuff, but that's essentially it. You just kind of tap on things. And then there's another called bloom, which is bringing up your start menu. Those are the only 2. And I often have questions, can you build your own? I say, yes, you can, but you're an idiot then, because it's really, really hard. It's incredibly hard to get gestures right, to make sure that you pick up the swipe and it's not like that, or it's really difficult. And also, how do users know? How do users know that you're actually doing it? So, all right, get rid of the dog. Voice, as I said, has a really, really, really cool voice recognition system. If anyone here at all uses Windows, there's a feature called Cortana on it. And Cortana's built in as well, works incredibly well. Yeah, no one gives a shit. Okay, go move on. Sound. The sound on it is actually one of the main components that make these experiences so real. Because they sit over your ear and because they are so close to reality, if the programmer's done it right, these are a big part of why these mixed reality experiences are so immersive. And then there's the last thing is the spatial mapping. And this is kind of a thing that most people gloss over, but it's really important. It's how the device map your environment. That's why it knows that there's a table over there and there's a chair over there and there's, that's the floor and there's the ceiling. It's how it maps your environment, the spatial mapping. That's what those environmental cameras do on the front. And it uses infrared, which is why it doesn't work very well in full sunlight. And, there's always a few limiting factors. And that's the Danish round tower. Has anyone ever been there? Anyway. Yes! There's one guy. 2. All right. This is why you're really here, right? You don't really give a shit about what I just said. Yeah, I know. All right. Okay. We'll try. Okay. And this is prone to demo failure, so bear with me. I'm going to have the magic HoloLens app. And you should be able to see what I see now. In a minute. Make sure, it's probably switched off. All right, hang on. Yeah, it's coming. It wasn't on. Let's do it again. Hey, look at that. Did you got a mic? Yeah. All right, I should really use the mic. I can't need my finger. There's a little bit of delay on when I move my head, but it's not bad. I'm tethered via my phone to the HoloLens and the laptop, okay? Because that's the most local network I could get. So here's the start menu. Looks like Windows 10. It moves around after me. Whee! Kind of. Oh, did it freeze? All right. Do you want to just someone just hit back and do that? This is very beta software. And it all depends on how well the wireless connection works. And because I tested it 10 minutes ago, now it won't work. Okay, I'm just going to soldier on here. You can't actually see what I'm doing. Just do it again, Rick. I'll try. I do have a backup way of doing this in case. Okay. So I can tap on this hologram. All right, bear with me. Plan B.
You got a video and you're just going to sync.
Yep.
No or no?
Correct. So hopefully this will work. Or not.
No or no?
Correct. No. Oh, there's something wrong with the network, I'm guessing. So hopefully this will work. Or not. Hey. Just hit live preview. Beta software. Come on. Come on. This is going well, isn't it? It's not first time. Oh! Yeah, just there's a very long delay on it. Just try and go down, because that frame rate might be just too high. It's probably a bandwidth issue for some reason. We'll try that. Okay. So this is the lowest resolution. Oh, fucking hell. Okay. So here's the holograms. Woo. There's about a 6-second delay on it, so it's going to be looking a bit weird. Oh, just keep doing it, Rick. Are you impressed yet? No? Okay, I've got holograms. I'm going to get a spaceship and I'll put it on this guy's head. And hopefully you can see it. Actually, we'll make it huge. How about that? You want a big spaceship? Ooh. Yeah. There you go. Look at that. Yeah. Now, this is all good fun, although you could argue...
It's not that much fun.
No, not that much fun. You get the idea, right? It's not really a mixed reality experience, though, because I'm just placing holograms in space. Like, it's not really doing anything. So I'll just do this. Get back out. Whoops. And that was... Actually, hang on. There should be a robo-raid thing. The cool thing is I can actually walk everywhere with it, right? Because you had... I've probably forgotten about that.
Is the spaceship still there?
The spaceship is still there. So I'm just placing robo-raid here. Oh, we can resume. Let's do that. Okay. Return to play space. Here I am. I was sitting down before when I was just testing this, and it was... Hopefully it'll remember. It should remember where I am. Now what? Yeah. If I sit down, like this. Just talk amongst yourselves. No, it's not working. Okay. I'm not going to do that. So the idea is that all of these experiences actually will interact with the spatial map. So if I now just kind of tap randomly on people, you can see where the map is going, right? You can see that the spatial map, can you see all those mapping? I'll try and move my head a bit slower because it's very confusing if you're just watching it like that. And what this does is that it creates this map of the room that I'm in, and I can move around and I can go over here and I can keep mapping things to my heart's content. And that's what the experience is using to actually place holograms in and interact with that model. Now if I go back here, just so you know I'm not just talking rubbish too much, there's a 3D view here and I can update this and it will actually paint that for me. How do I scroll in, Alex? Can I scroll? Hey? I don't know. No, 2-finger scroll just does that. Anyway, you get the idea. It builds a whole model of the room that you're in. I did one at home yesterday where I built a whole model of my living room, and it's actually really detailed. And that means you can then have another game that's called Young Conquer, which is a little squirrel guy that runs around and he jumps on your furniture and he's got to collect coins and he's got to solve mysteries with where you are. And there's another game called Fragments, which again lets you use... Should I take this off? Because I look like a dick, don't I? It's just the connection doesn't work to it. I apologize for that, but that was kind of half expected. And it's really kind of what Rick said. It's hard to explain without having tried it. But having this interaction between a digital thing that's not real, that seems real, and your real space kind of melts everything together.